Hi everybody, it's Miss Riley. How are you? I've missed your faces. I still miss your faces. I'm gonna make some videos of my lectures and then I'd like you to watch them and answer the question at the end of the videos. So we're continuing on with content area 4. As you know, you're just supposed to know content areas 1 through 6 at this point for the shortened AP Art History exam, which is exciting, but we do need to finish content area 4, which is pretty much 20th century art, and I love it. So hopefully you love it too. We're going to review Fauvism and then continue with Cubism. So when we left off, we were talking, well, actually, the last time I saw you, we talked about Goldfish by Henry Matisse from 1912. It's oil on canvas. It's a still life painting and it's considered a fauve artwork. So you might remember that the fauves were known for their really violent juxtaposition of color. Here's an example of some fauvist artwork. You could see that, well, fauve means wild beast due to the use of color. So you can see they use a lot of complementary colors and they were really influenced by post-impressionism. So the artwork from the fauves that you're supposed to know is Matisse's Goldfish. And, for Matisse, the goldfish symbolized a tranquil state of mind. And he, was thinking a lot about like Paradise Lost, and he was trying to kind of like conjure that back up. So he had also been to Morocco, and he said that the people there stared at fish bowls all day, which is, I think, kind of interesting. Anyway, so this is in his home, and the plants are from his garden, and this is his fish. So this isn't in Morocco, but he was definitely influenced by them. So, again, this is the same slide with Fauvism, and here's an image that Matisse painted of, people in Morocco staring at goldfish bowls. So, okay. Then Matisse made this painting, which is also considered a Fauvist painting, and it's called The Joy of Life in English. And it's considered to be one of his greatest fauve paintings, although this isn't technically the one that you're supposed to know for the 250, but it's fauve because the color is really responsive to emotions and not nature. It's not natural local color. And he's referencing Cézanne's Nude Bathers. He's like coloring outside of the lines. And at this point, this painting kind of made him the most daring painter in Paris. And this painting was bought by Gertrude and Leo Stein. And they were art collectors and they supported a lot of artists. And they had salons in these salon style meetings in their house all the time. And the young Picasso saw this painting and he went home and immediately began painting his Les Deux Amants d'Avignon. So this painting. So while it's a lot different, Picasso was really competitive and he didn't want to be outdone in the painting world. So he turned, it's a lot different obviously than Matisse's. Matisse's is like very serene. It's called The Joy of Life. It's people laying around naked in a field. And Picasso turned, Matisse's sensuality into this violent sort of pornography, since these are 5 prostitutes, which we're going to talk about again in just a second. Refresh. Here is Pablo Picasso, a picture of him. I'm sure you've seen him before. He has a very long name. I'm not going to name it all. I'm not going to put you through that. His dad was an art teacher. So, he's been an artist his entire life. He made so much work. But he did start, this is his blue period. So this was when he was only 19 years old. He moved to Paris. He was a starving artist. And I think that, he had a lot of, it was hard for him. I think one of his friends died And so he went through this blue period, and this is just an example of it where all his paintings are blue. Here's his blue self-portrait. This is then his rose period after he fell in love and was happy with his relationships. He started making artwork that was mostly rose colored or like pinkish colors. This is a portrait of Gertrude Stein by Pablo Picasso. And what you can see on the left is a photograph of her, and then on the right it's a painting of her. He painted it, it was probably like 90 sittings that she sat in. And in the end, he decided to finish it with this like Iberian sculpture type face of hers. So I'll show you an example of that in a second. But you can see that he was definitely influenced by Iberian sculpture. Like I said earlier, her brother and her would host these Saturday salons, and they were really great friends with Picasso. Here are this is some Iberian sculpture, so you can definitely see the influence on the painting of Gertrude Stein. But his paintings also had a lot of African influence. Here's some African masks. You can see the influence of those in The Three Women and Picasso of 1908. He visited a museum of African carvings and masks from French colonial Africa. He claimed that he wasn't influenced by African masks, but we all know that he clearly was. He had an African mask in his studio. He was probably just saying that he wasn't influenced by it because he, as you probably know, had a giant ego and didn't want to think that he was influenced by anything. But as you know, we're all influenced by a lot of stuff. Okay, so here is Les Deux Amants d'Avignon, and this painting opened this new door to this radically different method of painting. You can see that it is the beginning of Cubism. And you can also see the influence by Cézanne and African masks. But what's happening to the space here? I mean, look at it. Is there depth? Is there, Renaissance style linear perspective? Is it like Greek sculpture? No, it's none of it. So he's basically taken the subject and broken it down into shards of multiple views of an object. So this took hundreds of sketches and about 9 months to paint. And as you can imagine, people hated it. Now everybody loves it, but they definitely hated it. So you could see that the space is totally shallow. There is no depth at all. And like one of his goals was to show multiple views at one time. So that's why, you might see the side view of a nose, but the frontal view of the eye. You might see, the person in the foreground on the lower right. I think that she's sitting on a stool, but she has definitely a very odd angle. So, you see like he wanted to show all sides of her. So this is a sketch that was for this painting. There were many sketches. This is just one of them. You can see in the foreground there's like a little still life, like a little skull, kind of like a memento mori. And he is trying to reverse the gaze to the viewer. So, it's almost like they are all staring out at the viewer as opposed to the viewer staring at the women. Obviously it's mutual, but that's, like in this painting, by Manet, which was also radically different for the time, is, it's a painting it's addressing the history of painting. And Picasso is also addressing the history of painting and talking about the female gaze and everything. So this represents 5 prostitutes on the street called Avignon. It's in Barcelona, and everybody knew that this was a place that prostitutes hung out. So again, you can see that there's multiple views expressed at the same time. And Picasso unveiled this monumental painting in his Paris studio after months and months of revision. Um, Originally, the preparatory sketches showed that there was a figure at the left that was a man, but then, he eventually eliminated all of these anecdotal details for the final painting. So, Cubism. Analytic Cubism is typically thought to be from 1908 to 1914, which actually doesn't include the Picasso painting we were just looking at. But the Les Deux Amants d'Avignon is one of like the first Cubist painting, and then after that, people started kind of creating their own style. So this is the first Cubism phase. The colors are mostly monochromatic: tans, browns, grays, creams, greens, blues, and it's based on reducing natural forms to basic geometrical parts. It focused more on intellect than on emotion. So they're really analyzing the structure of forms. So this is a screenshot of just a Google search of analytic cubism. And so you can see that the subjects were typically some of them are they're not really very recognizable. They're just broken down so much. Um, these paintings are very detailed. The images are typically gathered tightly towards the center of the work, and then it grows sparser towards the edges. But the muted colors drew attention to this subtle shifting of perspective that embodied the artist's viewpoint. So, like I said, most people consider this to be the first Cubist work. And what were some of the influences? Think about it. We just talked about some of the influences. Yes, you're right. Cézanne was an influence for sure because he started breaking up the space into geometric shapes. African masks are a clear uh, influence, and the French colonization of Africa, that's definitely an influence. And the joy of life was an influence, but not so much as a formal quality, but conceptually he wanted to outdo Matisse. And then also Gauguin and his primitivism. You can see that Gauguin was also an influence here. So moving on, we have The Portuguese by George Brock from 1911, and it's oil on canvas. If you want to see more about Cubism from Sister Wendy, you can look her up on YouTube. It's a cute little video. Oh, cute's not the right word, but if you haven't seen Sister Wendy, she's awesome, so you should definitely look her up. Anyway, Picasso and Brock met in 1907, and they pioneered this new Cubist style. So there's fractured forms, they're breaking down objects into smaller forms, and as you can see here, there's a lot of monochrome with browns and blacks, and it really focuses on the geometric composition instead of on the color. So the surfaces really sit on the picture plane and they're not recessed into space. And then you can see up in the right-hand corner that there are stenciled letters, maybe representing a poster behind the guitarist. Not really sure. But it's not really a Portuguese musician, but more an exploration of shapes. So like I said, they wanted to break down the subjects into shapes. And they also were really interested in sort of viewing it from all different sides. This is kind of fun. So an analogy of the paper coffee cup. If the Renaissance was going to make artwork about the paper coffee cup, they would draw with perspective from one single point of view, right? And they would draw it very realistically. If Cézanne had the same assignment, he would draw the coffee cup from different angles. And with analytic cubism, they would rip up this paper coffee cup and then draw inside, outside, back, front, etc. So these geometric planes are basically, they're compressing the space a lot, and you can see the fragments of these different shapes. So again, in the top right-hand corner, he stenciled the letters D, B, A, L, and under them there are some Roman numerals. And you know, he had he included numbers and letters into a still life in 1910, and they were a representational element in the painting. But in this piece, the letters and numbers are really more of like a purely compositional addition. So his intentions in adding the letters are probably many, but they're mostly just to make the viewer aware of the canvas itself. This is the rest of the 20th century is a lot about just that, like having the viewer be aware of the canvas and not really paying so much attention to the subject. So yeah, and so by adding numbers out of context and all these surface textures, the viewer becomes aware of the fact that the canvas can also hold outside elements, making the surface of the painting just as important as what's put on it. So, okay, moving on. As you can see, this is just a different slide, so it might be a clearer slide. The Cubists rejected the pictorial illusion that dominated Western art for centuries. We talked about that. Braque concentrated on dissecting form and placing it in dynamic interaction with space. And you can ask yourself, how has he flattened the space? You can see here the influence of Cézanne and by his geometric shapes. And then after analytic cubism, which I guess I didn't say that, but this is clearly analytic cubism, right? Why? It's monochrome, it's hardly recognizable, the shapes are more clustered in the center, and it's supposed to be more intellectual. After that, around 1912 to 1919, synthetic cubism took over, and it really grew out of the analytic cubism. There was a wider use of color, wider use of materials. Papier-collé was basically a type of collage was introduced, and it was more appealing and easier to interpret, so people liked it more. It was less intricate, and it added substances like sand and paint to make it appear thicker. So synthetic cubism took the move to its extreme. So all the senses of three-dimensionality disappeared. Instead of breaking down and reassembling facets of the original image, it was a matter of synthesizing entirely new expansive structures. So artists started using collage methods overlapping various media, and they started including words and graphics and patterns to achieve, this thematic results. So colors were a lot brighter, geometric forms were more distinct, and textures began to emerge with things like sand and paper and gesso. So here's just an example of some of the things that came out of that. You can see the color, you can see that, this sense of three-dimensionality has disappeared. And instead of breaking down and reassembling all of these things, they were trying to, maybe think more about how to make it more aesthetic. They were thinking about color and, different textures and everything. So the word collage it derives its name from the French coller, which is to glue. And the work of art is made by gluing things to the surface. You know that, right? And so collage becomes an art form during the synthetic cubist period of Picasso and Braque. So if you like collage, you can thank Picasso and Braque for this. And here we have Picasso's still life with chair canning. It's oil and oilcloth on canvas. And yeah, you can see that it's a collage, basically. It kind of, this still life, it sort of challenges the viewer's understanding of reality, which I think Picasso was trying to do. So, and then here is Braque's collage. This is kind of interesting, this pipe that appears in the foreground in the lower right-hand corner, it's actually just a cut-through piece of paper. So, and then here's another sort of collage. It's a maquette for a guitar, and it's cardboard, string, and wire. So it's almost like a sculpture. And this is a model for a sculpture that he actually ended up making in metal. And yeah, so what would you say that this version allows the viewer to do? Yes, you're totally right. It allows the viewer to examine the inside and the outside, which is a lot what Cubist artists were trying to do. They wanted you to see things from all different angles and not just, frontal and perfectly rendered. So this one in particular, because it's a sculpture and it's three-dimensional, it's also showing both the mass and the void. It's like the surface and the interior. Um, and yeah, so, oh, I have one more thing to show you. So this is a Guernica, and I hope that you know this painting, maybe from your social studies classes. This really important painting. I'm going to show you this BBC 3-minute video, but I also just want to say this is the painting at the Prado, and it's huge. You can see it's like a total wall mural, basically, but I mean it's on canvas. Um, and, other than the title, Picasso really makes no specific reference to the event in this painting. Um, but, a really kind of fun fact, I don't know if it's fun, but I think it's fun. Picasso refused to allow this painting to be shown in Spain while Franco was in power. So only in 1975, after Franco's death, did Picasso allow the painting to be moved from its temporary home at the MoMA um, to the Reina Sofia in Madrid. So, which is obviously Picasso's homeland. So it was at the MoMA for a long time until 1975. So I'm going to show this little video. Actually, I'm going to show you this first. Okay. So this is the question that I want you to answer in Google Classroom and submit your answer. I was supposed to say your answer, not you answer. Sorry. What are considered to be contextual influences on the formal qualities of Picasso's work, such as Les Déshonneurs d'Avignon, which we see on the right? So basically, what influenced him? Answer that question. I'm going to show you this little, it's not even, no, it's 3 minutes. Okay. I'm going to show you this 3-minute video about Guernica. It's a really important painting. I'm surprised that it's not the painting, but I think because it's such an important painting for other reasons, the AP curriculum, oh, they're all important. Picasso made a lot of work. All right, let me see if I can transition here. Can I move this over? I might have to move this. Sorry, I'm new here. Okay. Let's see if I can move this up a little bit. Okay, that's probably as good as I'm gonna get. There we go. Okay, it's Okay, so that's it for today. Make sure that you, like I said, answer this question and submit it for one of your little assignments. So have a great night or morning or afternoon or whenever you're watching this, and I'll see you soon. Okay, miss you guys. Bye.